Silas Marner by George Eliot is about a weaver who loses his faith and becomes a recluse after he seems to be betrayed by both God and man. Later, he finds a reason to trust both of them again. And if this sounds like quaint Christian fiction in which there aren't really any stakes and it's pretty obvious that the main character will convert and be redeemed in the end, well, that's not really the case. Silas Marner is a highly experimental novel which blends different genres as diverse as the ballad and the detective story. In fact, I have a video essay in which I explain why Silas Marner is an anti-detective story. And it's because he cannot solve any mystery that is presented to him. And when other characters also try to solve the mysteries, it's so laughably bad that if you actually like crime thrillers, you might not find it amusing at all. So please check out that video essay for more of my thoughts on how Silas Marner bends this genre. But for now, I'm going to do a 5P review, which is based on a review and rating methodology developed by Book Gabber of Book Talk. My 5Ps for evaluating a book are purpose, plot, etc., prose, personal, and position. Number 1, purpose. Why did George Eliot write Silas Marner? What's its reason for existing? We actually have a statement from her. She said, "It is intended to set in a strong light the remedial influences of pure, natural human relations." Her main character experiences a kind of inner death because of the betrayal he has experienced, but also an inner resurrection and a social resurrection thanks to the goodwill and the kindness of his neighbors. But I'm afraid that's only the half of it. And to be honest, I am more than slightly disappointed that this is all Eliot seemed to think she was doing, because there is so much more at play here. The influence of Silas's new neighbors was really not enough to help him. The text is pretty clear that he lived among them for 15 years before any of the advances they made towards him, any attempts to be friendly and to welcome him into their community bore any fruit at all. And it wasn't even that they eventually wore him down. It took something else. It took some outside interference. And by outside, I mean outside the sphere of pure natural human relations. It took a really big coincidence that almost seems to have been planned by an invisible divine hand. So when it comes to purpose, I can give Silas Marner no higher than a 3 out of 5. Number 2, plot, etc. This is where I look at the components of the novel, the literary elements. If purpose is the message, then plot, etc. is the bottle. There are actually 2 main plots here. So there's Silas's story and also Godfrey Cass's story. Godfrey is the eldest son of the richest man in town, and he's sort of a foil to Silas. Silas is a recluse, Godfrey's well-connected. I should not give any more details away, but their stories are parallel at the beginning, not touching, and then they do touch at significant parts. However, we only see the significant parts, by which I mean that in the same way that there was a big jump from when Silas joined the community, a jump of 15 years until the outside event that happened, there's another jump of about 16 years. So I would say there is a sense of story, but not of plot. The big jumps make sense in the context of the story, but they make the plotting pretty awkward. And I'm also sad to say that the characters are not what I expected of George Eliot. Godfrey Cass, his character, uh, his love interest, Nancy's character, these are all psychologically realistic, what I've come to expect from Eliot. What I always find interesting in the way she creates characters is that whenever she shows you something good about a character, which makes you feel that, yeah, I can relate to this person sounds like a good hero or heroine, she then reveals something that's not so cool about them, something that makes you think, oh, okay, that's an embarrassing flaw to have. But Silas himself and Epi, the child he finds, they do not seem to be as realistically drawn. There is a sense of the ballad, like I said, and also a great sense of the fairy tale, especially when it comes to Epi, a child with golden hair who is found in the snow, having come seemingly out of nowhere. And finally, a literary element I want to discuss also is point of view. George Eliot's use of third-person omniscient point of view here is amazing. She doesn't choose it just because it was the most common point of view of her time. She actually makes, dare I say, a meta use of it. We are given the third-person omniscient point of view because that is, in a sense, God's point of view. He sees everything from the outside. And we have to see everything from the outside to understand why it's such a big mystery and also such a source of betrayal to Silas when he feels let down by his community and also by God himself. But her masterful use of point of view is, for me, not enough to carry plot and character, and that is why I only award Silas Marner in the category of plot, etc. 2.5 points out of 5. Number 3, prose. I was surprised by how difficult some parts of this were to read. And I don't mean difficult in the emotional sense, I mean difficult in the technical sense. This is not the smooth writing that I first encountered in Middlemarch, and that I also saw to some good effect in The Mill on the Floss. There were some sentences which were really quite clunky, and I don't think it's just because I had expectations coming from Middlemarch and The Mill on the Floss. Before I read Silas Marner, I had just finished Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens, and the prose there flowed so wonderfully. There were some sentences I did have to read twice, but not as many as those in Silas Marner, where I felt like the knot was given to me to unknot myself. There was a good thread of thought there, but I had to do the unknotting. Whereas I think a good prose stylist would give you that thread without so much unknotting to do on your part. For prose, I give Silas Marner 3 out of 5 points. Number 4, personal. I actually really enjoyed reading this. I even understood toward the end why the parts I did not like had to be written that way. And one example is the beginning. The beginning is quite a slog to get through. And when I looked back and saw that it had only been 5 chapters, I was honestly surprised. I thought it had been 10 or even 15. And it took days to get through those first 5 chapters, whereas the rest of the novel let me read at my usual pace. And it is a slog at the beginning because Silas's life is a slog, and we are supposed to feel that way. We're supposed to share that with him to understand how awful it was when he felt his faith die. His faith not just in God, but in his fellow man. So I get that, but it reduced my pleasure in the reading of this novel. So for pleasure, I give Silas Marner 4 out of 5 points. Finally, number 5, position. This is where I look at a novel's position in the canon and in the greater culture, especially if it had cultural impact, and the influence it had on literature going forward. So obviously Silas Marner was written by a great English novelist, but I did find myself wondering if George Eliot had not written Middlemarch and, okay, The Mill on the Floss, would we still be reading Silas Marner today? And honestly, I think it's so experimental and, well, so uneven in tone that I don't think we would be. It's still a good novel, as I said, still worth reading. I do recommend it. But it's kind of like The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. If it weren't for the Father Brown stories, and in particular the earlier Father Brown stories, we probably would have forgotten about Chesterton's other works of fiction. So when it comes to position, I give Silas Marner 2 out of 5 points. Before I started scoring it, I should have said that I like to give a score or a rating based on vibes. So if I had just been going on vibes, I would have given Silas Marner a rating of 3.4 stars out of 5. So I was really surprised when I assigned those points. I did the math and I saw that I had actually, at the end of a more exact thought process, given it 2.8 stars. Okay, so what do you think of the 5P system? Is it a good way to rate books, or do you have a way that you prefer instead that you think others should try? And also, what do you think of Silas Marner? Do you agree with me about the purpose, about the plot, the characters, the point of view? Do you have a different personal opinion? Would you like to fight me on the position this actually has in the literary canon and in our culture in general? And maybe, do you disagree with me about the prose? Let me know.